Hello, this is Alta Ifland, and this is Introduction to Sally by Elizabeth von Arnim. I received this copy from British Library Publishing, and I thank them for sending it to me, especially since they had to send it to France. I will present a video review of this novel in another video clip. But I'm using this opportunity to respond to the publisher's note that British Library Publishing published and with which they introduced this book to the reader. So again, this is Introduction to Sally, a novel by the writer of Australian origin Elizabeth von Arnim, who is a lot less known than should be. And I really appreciate that British Library Publishing is publishing her works now, because I am a big fan. So this being said, let me read at least part of the publisher's note, because it's important. The original novels reprinted in the British Library Women Writers series were written and published in a period ranging, for the most part, from the 1910s to the 1950s. There are many elements of these stories which continue to entertain modern readers. However, in some cases, there are also uses of language, instances of stereotyping, and some attitude expressed by narrators or characters, which may not be endorsed by the publishing standards of today. We acknowledge, therefore, that some elements in the stories selected for reprinting may continue to make uncomfortable reading for some of our audience, etc., etc. And then toward the end, it is not possible to separate these stories from the history of their writing, and the following novel is presented as it was originally published. Thank you for that. We welcome feedback from our readers, which can be sent to the following address. So, considering that they are asking for feedback, and also considering that I received this as a review copy, I decided I'm going to send feedback via this medium. Now, as it happens, just coincidentally, these days, after I finished reading the book, and in conjunction with this note that I find, disturbing, I discovered a document called the Freedom to Read Statement, which is a joint statement by the American Library Association and the Association of American Publishers, which was adopted first in 1953 and amended in 2004. Now, I assume that this Freedom to Read statement, which is also a sort of a statement on the standards of publishing, I assume that this is still valid today in 2023 in America. Now, of course, the British Library Publishing is not in America, but also I assume, I hope rightly, that the standards of publishing in America are similar to those in Great Britain. And if I'm wrong, I suppose somebody is going to let me know. I'm not going to read this whole statement because it's long, but I will read at least 2 points from it which are relevant to our discussion. So I quote, "Publishers, librarians, and booksellers do not need to endorse every idea or presentation they make available. It would conflict with the public interest for them to establish their own political, moral, or aesthetic views as a standard for determining what should be published or circulated." So it seems to me that this is relevant because from this note, it appears that the expression, the publishing standards of today, I mean, when there is that particular sentence that I read earlier in which we are being told that there are elements, language, maybe stereotypes, attitudes expressed by narrators or characters, which may not be endorsed by the publishing standards of today. So there is some kind of an implication here that a publisher today needs to endorse the attitudes, opinions, language, whatever, of the characters or of the narrators expressed in the books they publish. And that I found very disturbing because, and as I read from that joint statement, this does not seem to be the standard publishing, at least until 2004. Now, maybe something changed meanwhile, but in fact, if somebody knows that some new standards have been published, I would like to know that. But as I suspect, we are not talking about any official standards. We are simply talking about the fact that in recent years, there has been a lot of pressure from certain readers who are trying to apply to enforce their own standards and tastes, which often are based on ignorance. So now, the British Library Publishing doesn't say that they are not going to publish this book. Obviously, they did publish it, and I'm grateful for that. But they say what that I just read, and then they continue. We acknowledge, therefore, that some elements may continue to make uncomfortable reading for some of our audience. Now, okay, why do we need to acknowledge that? Why really do we need to acknowledge that? Because it's as if you are excusing yourself that you are publishing this book, which is a very, very good book. And this great writer doesn't deserve, I mean, nobody needs to, you don't need to apologize for publishing her. And let me read another point from the joint statement, the freedom to read statement. It is the responsibility of publishers and librarians as guardians of the people's freedom to read, to contest encroachments upon that freedom by individuals or groups seeking to impose their own standards or tastes upon the community at large. So it is the responsibility of the publishers. It is not the responsibility of the publisher to indulge readers who want to impose their own taste or standards, or readers who feel uncomfortable for whatever reason they might want to feel uncomfortable or they feel uncomfortable. It's truly disturbing that a publisher, and a very obviously respectable publisher, is excusing themselves for making the reader uncomfortable. And believe me, I read this book, and if this book makes you uncomfortable, well, then you should probably stop reading, because really this is not uncomfortable reading. It's extremely enjoyable. It's Elizabeth Fornanim is one of the most enjoyable. I mean, she's one of the most enjoyable writers that I know. In fact, she's one of those rare writers that are at the same time can be extremely enjoyable by a great public and by a big readership, and at the same time, she is very intelligent, extremely witty. That's a rare gift to combine these two. So why excuse yourself or apologizing for publishing her? If you want to write a note to the reader, I mean, you can write other notes in which you explain to the reader why the reader should. It's a good thing for the reader to be exposed to things that are different values. I mean, that's the whole point of reading in the end, because you are just exposed to what you already know and something that you already agree with. What's the point of reading? And also, one could explain to the reader that literature is not ideology, and that also, let's say that Elizabeth von Arnim wrote something that is depicted something that is really unpalatable, which she really doesn't, because this book is not, it's very pleasant. But if she did, after all, how can we find out about the negative things happening in our societies if writers don't write about them? It's the only way to know how people lived in the past and what opinions they had and what kind of beliefs they had. If writers depict in a truthful way that reality, so to have an ideology that imposes some kind of taboo of representation, that's the ideology that exists only in theocracies. I mean, it's only a priest that wants only pretty things or uplifting things, maybe, that should be depicted. Because they want a reality that would correspond to one's wishes. And I say they, I mean, I don't think most priests are like that, but let's say that there is some kind of a reader who wants that. So if there are readers like that, and obviously there are, we all know readers like that, I understand why British Library Publishing felt obligated to publish this. I do understand that. But why let yourself blackmail by this sort of ridiculous standards? Are really these the standards of publishing today? Because after all, that kind of reader who is made uncomfortable by whatever, that's the least likely reader to even open a book written 100 years ago. The reader that is likely to open such a book is this kind of reader. And this kind of reader has only been made uncomfortable by this note, by nothing in the book. It's only this note that made me uncomfortable. So this being said, thank you again for having sent me the book, Introduction to Sally by Elizabeth von Arnim. I greatly enjoyed it. And there is another video that I'm going to do separately in which I present this novel. Again, thank you for sending it, and thank you for publishing it.